Maria Walsh. I'm Senior Vice President of Global Benefits for Hearst. We own television, magazines, newspapers. I think where we might differ is the need for specialists around trauma because of the journalists that that we do have among our employees, and they have a different sort of set of needs, I think.
Media is very different from any other industry I've worked in. You know, the journalists are on the front lines every day, covering the breaking news stories, covering wildfires, riots, you know, what's happening in the city of San Francisco, for example.
How you doing?
Okay.
Okay.
You know, you kind of have to be badass. You know, that's kind of how we think of ourselves. And you don't want to be that weak person that can't do the job.
There's a lot of sadness involved in it, and trauma.
There are just these moments that, like, you know, these stories that you cover that just stay with you forever.
But it does, it sits there. All that stuff is here. You know, it never leaves you, and for good and bad. You want to keep that stuff with you. You want to remember it. I would hate to forget these things. I don't know what that would mean.
So I was a health writer during the pandemic, during the COVID pandemic, and that was incredibly stressful, incredibly hard. For me, the stress came from that incredible weight of responsibility. And I cherish that. I really felt like a privilege. I felt honored to have that responsibility. But the other side of that was it was definitely a burden. It felt really stressful to just try to get people this information that was, again, life and death.
A lot of us were really just kind of struggling. So we got together with management and really sat down, a group of us, and told them what our jobs were like and experiences that we had been through.
Here's war. I'm in a bunch of these. Iraq war.
The first meeting was with two human resources people, and as we were each telling our stories, their jaws literally dropped. And by the end of that meeting, they're like, okay, we gotta get people, we gotta do more.
When I reached out, Hearst Benefits immediately responded. We got Spring involved. And then from there, Spring started looking for a dedicated therapist for us.
Even when we launched Spring and we said, well, look, now we have this really great new provider, service for you, you can access anytime, they still felt like they needed more. When you launch a program and it's great for 98% of your employees, you're feeling good about it, right? It's exciting. But you hear from that 2% and then you see the need and you're just like, oh my gosh, like what can we do? And Spring really stepped up to that challenge and helped us find someone. I hadn't even thought, that we could do that. What we were asking for was different, right? We wanted someone highly trained in trauma, PTSD, that could speak to journalists. And it really was like finding a unicorn. We got very, very lucky.
I'm nervous.
You're doing great.
My name is Mariah, and I am an in-house clinician with Spring Health, and I was brought into this role to be dedicated to Hearst newspaper employees.
I was going through some personal stuff, and that's when I started working with Mariah. Honestly, that work I did with her was one of the really key reasons why I ended up staying, probably. So on that front, I'm actually really grateful to her.
All right.
Journalists are like people with such high integrity. I think that they frequently downplay what they've been going through and what they've gone through in their careers, the sacrifices that they've made, And so I want to come in and say, like, of course you're feeling hurt. Of course this is personal.
I think a lot of us didn't know. We'd never had any services like this that were useful. Because I now have kind of taken advantage of a lot of these opportunities to address mental health. In some ways, I feel healthier than ever because I'm not hiding away. I'm not sort of pushing aside these things that I would have in the past.
I mean, they're exceptional, right? What they're doing is really great and really different. And I think Spring has just been, the perfect vendor. I just want people to be happy. And they were, and it was immediate.
And I hope that that more than anything, I can, really help people understand that there's enough space for what they're going through too. Just because you're taking care of other people's stories doesn't mean that your story isn't important.
Yeah, you don't have to be macho. You can be vulnerable and strong at the same time. You can be vulnerable and badass. And that's amazing.